My name's John Sandeman, Sampson Tours CEO. I appreciate everybody coming today, and I'm very thankful and grateful for this opportunity. And I'd like to start with a Bible verse and then a short prayer. It's from Leviticus chapter 19, verse 15. You shall do no injustice in court. You shall not be partial to the poor or defer to the great, but in righteousness shall you judge your neighbor. So let us pray. Heavenly Father, please help us become the leaders you have designed us to be. Grant us the wisdom to walk the path you have laid out for us, and forgive us should we stumble. Empower us to lead with love, integrity, and faithfulness. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. A little short bit. This is Sampson Tours. We're a motor coach and school bus operator since 1983. This is our 41st year in business. I hope to continue that trend. And hopefully this discussion will aid us in that endeavor. But to move things along, I'd like to introduce our Governor, Brian Kemp. He is the 83rd governor of Georgia, a small business owner, a friend to small business, and he listens to his constituents, which is unique in a lot of politicians these days. So, Governor, I'll hand it off to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you, John, for having us today. I'm also prayerful for a cool August day while we're out in your shop. I was just thinking when you were saying that Bible verse and praying for us, as political leaders, we have people every day, at least I do, and I'm sure everybody else is the same, and people come up and say, we've been praying for you, and we certainly appreciate that and need it. But our small business people need that too. I've been one, still am, and as many of us talking earlier, it's tough out there, and you're literally fighting and praying through every day in times like we've seen with 40-year high inflation and other things. So I just want to thank you guys for having us. I want to thank the Sampson Trailways team for hosting us here today, because it is, I think, good for us as policymakers to be here where the rubber's meeting the road, literally. I also want to thank Hunter Loggins and Nathan, the rest of the team, for the NFIB, for moderating this morning's conversation. Nathan's going to help us, or Hunter's going to help us with that. Also glad to be with some great partners in the General Assembly, and our Lieutenant Governor, Burt Jones, Speaker John Burns, who, like myself, are both small business people. So we understand, what's happening out there in the real world, and I know a lot of the great House and Senate leaders that are here do as well. And this is, quite honestly, I think, by the showing today of the leadership in the General Assembly and certainly the governor's office, a lot of members of our team here today, that we are all working on this issue together, and that both branches of government understand, a lot of the problems that are facing us, facing our state, facing our people, and certainly our small business owners. And we are committed to addressing the problem of runaway prices that are hurting hardworking people in our state. I also want to thank our Insurance Commissioner, John King, for being with us. John, for anybody that pays attention, where the rubber's meeting the road, he's in the middle of it all the time on a lot of different issues. And we had a great panel discussion the other day on our healthcare waivers and lowering health insurance costs for our citizens. And he's also playing a vital role in our discussion here today. And I just want to thank him for the important role that he plays in safeguarding those with insurance in our state. Also want to thank many leaders in a lot of different industries and associations that are here with us today. You have a very important voice in this ongoing discussion, and I'm eager to hear what you're going to share with us today. Just want to recap where we've been. A little over a year ago, we made news at the congressional luncheon that the Georgia Chamber had about my intention to work toward common sense lawsuit reform, while still bringing jobs to Georgia and maintaining our #1 state for business designation that we're so proud of. We took the first meaningful steps on that issue this past session through House Bill 1114, the Data Analysts for Tort Reform Act, which was sponsored by one of my floor leaders, Will Wade. That bill created a mechanism to gather the needed information that will guide our next steps on this multi-year issue, and Commissioner King and his team are working on that as we speak. That information will complement what we're doing here today, hearing directly from those impacted by the ever-increasing cost of civil litigation. Also, I know that in the Senate and in the House, along with the Insurance Commissioner's Office, we have worked on specific legislation to this issue, Senate Bill 426 and Senate Bill 83, and both the legislative chambers and the Commissioner will remain valued partners in this broader effort. The members of my team know that this is a sensitive issue for a lot of people in the room and also countless others across the state. So I wanted to make several points before our discussion starts today. Every policymaker at this table is committed to hearing all voices and sides of this issue. This is not an easy problem to tackle, but it's one where we should and will work together to address. My team and I look forward to making a policy proposal during the coming legislative session. The Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor and I spoke about that yesterday. But for now, as we await the data from House Bill 1114, we are focused on these listening sessions, and we're focused on making sure that we're giving people an opportunity to let us hear their concerns and ensure that input from them will help us inform what we ultimately propose. But most of all, I want to reiterate what our ultimate goal should be, and that is stabilizing costs for Georgia citizens and businesses and making sure that they have access to multiple folks in the marketplace. Right now, everyone across the country, including our fellow Georgians, are struggling under record high prices. Insurance costs are a major component of that growing cost. For example, a recent report by consumer financial services firm Bankrate ranked Georgia as the most expensive state in the country for hidden cost of owning a vehicle, with drivers of new vehicles paying an average of $8,249 per year. Insurance makes up a large part of that cost, with Georgia rated 13th highest in the nation for full vehicle insurance coverage. Lawsuits have become a significant pain point for both small businesses like those represented here today and the Georgians that they serve. For 10 years, we have remained the #1 state in the country for business. If we want to maintain that distinction, this is an issue that we must address. That's what we need to keep in mind during these and our other discussions that we'll be having. During all three roundtables my office will hold on this issue and in the discussions to come as we prepare for the upcoming legislative session. So as we carefully and deliberately move through this endeavor, I want to again thank everyone in the room and those across the state who have been engaged on this issue. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Lieutenant Governor Jones, and I look forward to hearing from all of you this morning. Governor Jones.
Thank you, Governor, and Speaker, good to be with you and good to be with the leadership from the House and Senate, as well as business owners here in the around the state. I thought I was going to actually be late getting here today because this morning I was working on, guess what, an insurance renewal for my company, and we a company that we're going to be looking at a 40% increase on our insurance coverage, and the carrier that we've been with for 14 years, even though we've had a good track record with them, because of the line of business that we're in the convenience store and fast food business, they no longer feel comfortable being on those exposures, and so we're having to be creative with different captives or whatever. But as I travel around the state, it's the #1 issue that I'm hearing from small businesses and both small and large businesses, because it is a cost of doing business that with everything else that's going on, when you sit and look at a renewal, I don't think I've talked to anybody that's had anything lower than a 20% increase on insurance premiums, and a lot of it has to do with the climate, that has happen. There's been a lot of good things that have happened in the state, and we want to continue to be a state where it's business friendly. And in order to do that, you got to be looking at all aspects of business costs. So, Governor, I appreciate you putting this together, and I appreciate the feedback from everyone here, and just look forward to the conversation and see if we can't come up with a resolution that would be beneficial to everybody. So, thank you. Thank you, Governor.
With that, thank you, Lieutenant Governor Jones. Now we'll hear from our speaker, John Burns.
Thank you, Governor. Good to see all of you. Lieutenant Governor Jones, always good to be with you. And certainly we talk on a regular basis, and this was one of the things we talk about on a regular basis. Certainly thank you for the input from folks all over this state. I see one of my constituents, John Triplett here. He's a small businessman, a growing small businessman, and he has a unique function. He serves the communities and some underserved communities in the grocery business. So thank you, John, for the efforts you're making and your company and your team's making. Yes, Governor, I always like to reiterate that when we're the #1 place in this country in which to do business and the best place to live, work, and raise a family. I'm glad you left that one for me to say. But we can't do that with a one-sided system. And that seems to be where we are now. When it comes to litigation and when it comes to protecting the rights of consumers, we also need to protect the rights of those who are providing services for those consumers. It is time for litigation reform. I'm proud of I'm especially proud of the 1114, as you mentioned, Governor. We like to do something in the House, and that's deal with facts. As we seek to gather the facts with the insurance commissioner and the governor and y'all's teams and roundtables like this, we'll hear exactly what we need to hear to continue to construct effective policy that, as already this session we passed several pieces of tort reform, if you will, that moves the needle, starts the process. As I also like to say, Rome wasn't built in a day, but we started the process and we're moving forward. And I think the information we'll gather over the next couple of events you're holding, Governor, will certainly lay the groundwork for us to do, put some meaningful legislation together that we'll work on in 2025 that will move that needle, will protect small businesses and businesses all across our state, and make sure that there is a level playing field. Our task is, I believe, just finding that balance that exists between consumer rights, business providers, business owners, that protects Georgians in every sense of the word, and continues to encourage the positive business climate we have here in Georgia. Sounds easy, doesn't it? But it's not. We all know that. It's going to be a tough road, but we have to bring all the voices together. And at the end of the day, I know that should be our goal, and I'm very confident with those folks that are in this room, the admonitions we'll get and the counsel we'll get from you guys and with the leaders around this table, that we'll be successful and we'll do the right thing for every Georgian that's involved. Thank you, Governor. Commissioner John King.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First of all, my job is not to sell you insurance. Although I'm the insurance commissioner, my job is to describe the market and the effects that it's taken in our state and try to bring balance. As the Speaker and the Governor and Lieutenant Governor described, we're trying to bring this because we're out of balance. Right now, the challenge that we're seeing in the marketplace, rates, the insurance companies are asking for rate increases of an average of 25%. No, not a single insurance company has gotten a 25% rate increase. We negotiate every time they come in. We've been able to keep them about 12 to 14%, but the pressure is getting bigger and bigger. And what's happening is insurance companies are walking away from the state. And we all know what that does to the market. When companies stop selling products, I can guarantee you that the rates will go up. And so we took some meaningful and dramatic steps starting last session. We passed direct action. We revoked where insurance companies would name as named defendants in a lawsuit when it comes to commercial vehicles. And so I really appreciate the hard work, because that was not easy. A lot of hard work took among the partners that we have, both in the legislature and the governor's office, to to get that done. Now, Georgia is not one of 4 states in the nation that had a direct action statute on the books. There's now only 2 states, but God bless their little hearts, we'll let them continue working on that. What happens is right now is that we have a challenge where our public thinks that when they get in an accident, that they won the lottery. Insurance was never a lottery, and that is what's causing the lack of balance. I really appreciate the governor and the legislature and the speaker and lieutenant governor give me the task of gathering the data. What does 1114 do? We are going to insurance companies and asking for their litigation costs. And we're asking for 3 buckets. The first bucket is, what is the results of claims where there was no attorney involved, where a claim was made and the insurance company paid directly? What is that cost? The other one was, what is the cost when there's a lawyer involved, but there's no lawsuit involved? What is the cost of that? And then the third one is when litigation is. And so that is what this body here needs, is some hard facts so they can make decisions. Nobody in this room wants people not to have access to a fair legal system where if they've been damaged, there's justice. But the unfairness, the crushing marketplace that we have right now is making all the costs of insurance going up. What does that mean with this data that we're gathering? What that means is, how do we convey this legalese and all this, complicated legal and insurance language? Why does the average Georgian, why should they care about this? Because they're paying for this. They're paying through all the food desert. It's a lot of fancy words, but that means that you have to drive farther to find your basic needs. That is why, and so we have to describe these terms. I asked one request, Governor, is that we stop calling it tort reform, because it confuses the hell out of everybody. In Spanish, it means sandwich. And so that tells you how bad torta. And so we need to describe it for what the effects to the consumer means. And I think we can have a more valuable conversation if we start at least making it where folks in this shop and the media, watch out for the Gojo in the back, because you'll get some on your clothes. But why this matters to the average Georgia consumer, not to legislators, not to lawyers, not to insurance companies. Why the average consumer ought to be engaged and should be asking about this. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, Commissioner King, Governor Kemp, Speaker Burns, Lieutenant Governor. This is an important issue. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Hunter Loggins. I'm the State Director for the National Federation of Independent Business here in Georgia. We got over 7,000 members representing a wide range of industries, most of them represented here today. And thank you for choosing a small business to host the first of these roundtables on this issue. I had a lot to say on why we're here in the background, but you guys did a fantastic job covering it, so we'll just skip that. I will say, there is no doubt in my mind that Georgia is the #1 place to do business. However, I'm a competitive person. Let's run up the score. Let's fix this problem and make it so no state can claim even close that they're #1. All right? So let's give a little bit of clerical work here before we get started. We've got some guidelines you all received on the questions. Most of these will probably be answered throughout the discussion, and that's what I want it to be, a discussion. However, I want your answers to be succinct, to the point. Let's stick to the facts so we could get through it and hopefully be able to have a meaningful discussion here. So for the first one, has anyone had any difficulty renewing liability insurance or finding new coverage for their business? Raise their hand. Yeah, all of us. So I'm going to kick it off. I'm going to pick on my member John Sandeman here and Charles over there, because they're in the trucking industry and it seems like it's hit them a good bit. when you speak first, if it's the first time speaking, make sure you mention your name, your business, or your industry, and who you represent. So, John, tell me a little bit about your experience.
All right, John Sandeman, CEO of Sampson Tours. We're actually currently trying to get insurance coverage renewed. September 27 it runs out. I have 0 quotes so far. I do hope to have at least 2, maybe. I'm hoping it won't go up too much. Our rates went up 400% from 2020 to present, and even in 2020 it was up versus that prior year. It's gotten to the point where it's almost untenable in the state of Georgia to find coverage for my kind of business, which is transportation. You know, Lady Justice has the blindfold removed and a thumb on the scale, and it's always against the small business operator. I've got one case, I'll be brief. A little girl and her mother trying to get to my school bus on a school route gets hit by a car, kills the little girl. Mother's very severely injured. This was 2018. We did not direct them to come across. It was a legal stop, lights flashing. The driver was loading other children. But because they were trying to get to my bus, we got sued. They wanted $10 million. They settled for $5 million. It took years. And I don't know what I could have done different. And that's just one case. I got a whole bunch of cases. I can't say all of them, but you know, all this stuff. We're just getting hammered left and right by lawyers who can write a letter and get $30,000 with almost no work, vaguely place some threats, call me bad names. If I goes to court, like on that case with the little girl, I did a mock trial as the CEO, and they put that in front of a jury. And they said Sampson should have to pay between $262,000 to cover the mother's health costs, which were severe, up to as much as, I think it was $130 million.
John,
I don't know how to do that.
How many insurance providers could you have gotten?
That's the other problem. Okay, the reason we're in this boat,
to this point.
back in the day, there were probably 15 different companies we could choose from to get quotes. Now there's 4, maybe 5. National Indemnity, who I'm with now, is leaving the transportation market because they can't make money. My broker's entire book of business for the last 20 years has been a losing book of business for all of the carriers he works with. It's that bad. And so there's so many insurance companies leaving the market. Pretty soon you won't be able to get coverage in certain areas, causing food deserts and other things. Pretty soon other companies have gone out of business. My industry was devastated. More than half of the companies are now out of business since 2020. It's coming back slightly. But the problem is just getting worse. I've never seen it this bad. I don't even know if I can get coverage. If I can't, I'll have to do something else. And every year it's the same. I don't know if I can get coverage. So how do you plan your business when you don't know if you can be around a year later?
Charles, do you want to speak on that? And if you do have something to say, please raise your hand. I'll do my best to get to you.
Thank you. My name is Charles Tarbutton, and I am the president of BH Transfer, a commercial motor carrier, a for-hire motor carrier based in Sandersville, Georgia. And I am the chair this year of the Georgia Motor Trucking Association. I'll echo a lot of what John said, but I would step back first and say clearly there are a lot of challenges in the auto liability markets for commercial carriers, but remember that every person that insures an automobile is experiencing this kind of rate inflation for the very same reasons, just on a smaller dollar scale. A little bit about what's happening in the trucking industry in Georgia. I polled 4 Georgia-based motor carriers, including my own company, to make it 5. And this inflation in auto liability rates really started for us in the 2020, 2021, 2022 timeframe. And so the data that was reported to me, one carrier in Augusta had a 20% increase in 2020, a 34.9% increase in 2021. Our company had a 27.9% increase in 2020, followed by a 9.9% increase in 2021. And then another carrier, Governor, a close friend of yours, their cumulative rate increase across 4 years was 193%. 193% cumulative. So what steps are trucking companies attempting to make to mitigate some of those cost increases? They're really, and this is in a market where carriers are leaving the auto liability market and carriers are leaving the excess liability markets. So as John said, 5 or 6 years ago, we might be able to market our plan to 12 excess carriers. And today they're 5 or 6. And big names are leaving this exposure area in the insurance markets. But what we're having to do is bear more risk. And we're bearing more risk through higher deductibles, higher SIRs, risk sharing through potential assessments, all kinds of different maneuvers where basically to keep rate increases at a level that we can survive with, we are bearing more risk every year in that. And so we are constantly trading or trying to balance the need to protect our P&L. It's where do you want the risk? You want it on your P&L or do you want to shift it to your balance sheet? Neither of which are sustainable.
Thanks, Charles. For those of you that do business in other states, are you seeing anything similar? Senator Gooch, he's kind of on the line, or are you seeing folks leaving just on the other side of the border?
I was going to ask you the same question. Maybe Charles can answer that. The companies that you've seen leave the market, did they leave Georgia or did they leave the market nationwide? Thank you.
I know that some of the primary carriers in the residential automotive, the car insurance, have left Georgia. What we have seen is, particularly in the excess markets, that companies will leave the industry. They will just stop writing auto liability excess policies altogether.
So I had a similar experience with Donegal Insurance this year. They basically pulled out of the Georgia market. I think the governor has that same insurance carrier. So we're shopping rates right now. We're going through that same brutal process. So I think the question may be more appropriate to the commissioner if we could ask him to answer that same question. Are we seeing these companies leave Georgia primarily because of our situation we have with some of these frivolous lawsuits?
Yes, what we've seen, and I've talked to my fellow commissioners in the Southeast United States. The first indication that I saw this was in the logging industry, especially down in Bainbridge. We started seeing folks going into Alabama and going into North Florida, because in Tennessee is taking a lot of the companies, and they're not leaving the Georgia market. They're just not selling additional policies. They're basically freezing. The ones that are staying are freezing in place, increasing rates. They're not. And so what they're doing is they're moving their book of business to the states surrounding us: South Carolina, Tennessee, Alabama, and Florida. And that's what we're looking at. What's the outlier? What makes Georgia different? It is our current environment in our courts.
We have some insurance professionals in the room. I know we got Chairman Walker over here, and we got Will from the Independent Insurance Agents, if you all want to speak on it from that side of things.
Sure, be happy to. So my name is Will Wilson. I'm from Savannah, Georgia, principal with Oak Bridge Insurance Agency. We're a retail regional insurance agency, and we work in about 6 or 7 states. There's probably not an industry sitting around the table that we don't work with, and so we get unique insight into what our clients do. I like to tell folks that, at the end of the day, whenever we work with a client, an insurance policy does get sold, but it's more or less a byproduct of our consultation with them, trying to meet their needs, meet contract requirements, so on and so forth. There's been a couple of things that have been said about, carriers leaving the market. Before I came here this morning, I got on the commissioner's website, And we currently have right at about 1,098 admitted insurers in the state of Georgia, some of them domestically admitted, some of them from other states. And then we hear about, out of those 1,098, we've got no quotes yet, 4 or 5 folks, people leaving the market. Not every insurance company is going to make the drastic move of leaving the state of Georgia, like, for instance, Donegal, that's going to make the AJC headlines. You can leave the market without taking that kind of drastic action. It is a voluntary marketplace. It's a complex marketplace. Carriers have to pick and choose what they look at based on the specific characteristics of each individual business. And so that being said, the deteriorating legal climate, the demand letters that are just 5-minute copy and paste deals that turn into $30,000 claims, $40,000 claims, and there's no penalty for the plaintiff if it does go to trial and they lose. There's a zero-lose game in it for them. It's all, what makes economic sense from an insurance company standpoint. So anyways, I've probably got some more things to say later on, but I'll shut up for now.
Thanks, Will. A few of you touched on it briefly, and I think Commissioner King said the lowest he's seen was 20% increase. What's the highest around here? I know John has some stories. Robert, go ahead.
Since 2018, our child care center, Robert Hill, Georgia Child Care Association, Kadazzle Child Care. Since 2018, we've seen a 100% increase in our insurance costs from $49,000 to what is $90,000. And so, don't get me wrong, child care, if you have a child, no one wants to see your child hurt. If anything happens at the center, that center should pay. But when we get a lawsuit for the parent's negligence, that's a concern. And so there has to be a level of burden to help the insurance company to say, hey, this is, thank you.
Yeah, I don't want to put him on the spot, but Peter, dealing with independent security businesses, you could kind of see the adjacent and tangential problems there. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Sure. Pete Skyko. I'm from a Chicago law firm. I've been a trial lawyer for the last 32 years on the defense side. I want to thank the governor, lieutenant governor, and all state leaders for allowing this carpetbagger to come in and address you here today. Yes, we see, to answer Representative Gooch's question, I see it all over the country. I represent the National Association of Security Contractors. Security contractors all over the country, big and small. And yes, carriers are pulling out across the country. They are also pulling out in Georgia. I've seen letters where carriers have made reference to Georgia's litigation climate as being a critical reason why they're no longer offering coverage. And to speak to some of Will's points, another way that insurance carriers can freeze and not leave the state is by excluding certain coverages. Exclusions such as assault and battery, such as sexual molestation, such as firearm use. Those are ways in which, insurers can pull out without pulling out, and that does no good for people who need those coverages. And the reasons, again, obviously, just from the nature of those exclusions, is because of what's going on with Georgia's climate. I've got plenty to speak about with respect to some of the other issues on the agenda, but with respect to insurance, that's the real crisis, in my opinion, is the insurance, the ability to get it, the ability to get enough of it, and the ability to get what you need to run your business.
Sorry, I'm going to already speak again here, but I want to piggyback on Peter's comment there with the exclusions. Since 2017, 2018, and we started cataloging this, we have seen just an onslaught of exclusions come through that get filed. Assault and battery, sexual abuse, molestation, firearms, weapons, many of it surrounding the premises liability aspect of it. And some of that is all tied to a recent Supreme Court case. So nobody wins when these exclusions get there, because then coverage is there. The plaintiff doesn't win, the plaintiff attorney doesn't win, and you don't typically hear the commercials say anything about we won a case against somebody and we took that small business down. It's we took the insurance company down.
Go ahead.
I'm John Triplett with B&T's Food Fresh. I represent the GFIA, which is the Georgia Food Industry Association, and I'm real proud of Kathy Kazava and her leadership. But I'm speaking on behalf of all grocers in Georgia. I appreciate your kind, warm welcome, Speaker Burns. Thank you. I live in rural Georgia. I'm married with 4 kids. Governor, I'm a Georgia boy. You know, I born here. I went to public school. My kids go to public school. Went to state college. You know, had a lot of help with Hope. Had a lot of opportunity. And over the years, we've grown exponentially in our business. So for that, I want to say thank you. I remember hunting and fishing with my Uncle Tom Triplett, and I said, why would you do this? And he said, because I love Georgia and I love people. So to all y'all, thank you for coming. I mean, it means a lot to see government in action and to see how it really works in real life. So thank you. As I say, I own 10 stores, and liability insurance is a problem because ours got canceled. You know, we had a perfect record for years with no claims, and all of a sudden you have a year of a few frivolous things and they just drop you. And like Mr. John and Mr. Charles said, there's no other options out there. And I would estimate, Hunter, our increases are in the 30 to 40% per year. So, I mean, they keep stacking, and they get harder to get and they're harder to find. And in the insurance defense, I mean, why would they want to represent us? You know, I mean, why would they want to come where we're having 1,000 customers a day that could potentially slip and fall over their own feet and sue you?
I'm going to call on Matt real quick.
Good afternoon. I'm Matt Jones with the Georgia Association of Convenience Stores. My senator, Larry Walker's here. But I do echo John's comments. I mean, sometimes in small business, you get a little jaded about the political process, and it really is meaningful to hear elected officials care and to listen. As far as the answer to the immediate question, I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but I think it's important to recognize the economic impact that the civil litigation is creating on our economies. So we represent, or I'm here on behalf of the convenience stores. So there's over 6,000 convenience stores in Georgia, and over half of the Georgia population comes into a convenience store each day. So you better believe we have a lot of frivolous lawsuits. But when you think about it from the economic impact of what we as an association represent, we collect over $7 billion of taxes for this state. We generate over $2 billion of payroll expense. We create jobs. We create infrastructure. Contrast that with the civil litigation. Most of these settlements are structured in a way where a lot of the recovery is tax-free. These plaintiffs' firms are so lean, they don't create any jobs. You don't need hardly but 1 or 2 paralegals to have a successful firm. So effectively what's happening is they're just sucking out billions of dollars from the economy. Meanwhile, people like us have increased costs, increased premiums, and the risk of doing business is harder and harder every year. So I think if we just look very objectively at the impact that this has, I mean, it's essentially like we're all saying, it's a no-brainer. And I think it's important to remember, you know, I'm like Peter over here. I'm actually am an attorney as well. And our president was telling me, you know, this isn't about attorneys, but I started my career in insurance defense. I was on the good side of the V, as we say as well. So I had a unique experience in evaluating claims, and then I had an opportunity to go clerk for a federal judge. So I could see it from the judiciary standpoint of evaluating cases. And then I was afforded an opportunity to go to Dublin, where we have a 100-year-old company, 5th-generation family business, and it really gave a lot of pride to be able to make a difference in people's lives. So having that unique experience, we're not talking about, you know, in cases where you have good lawyers on both sides with, you know, a true question of fact. And I won't name names, but we have defended a case against someone in this room, and they did a great job. And that's just the legal process. We're not saying we're eradicating all lawsuits. It's the frivolous ones that we're talking about. The ones that where you draft a demand letter, and then you get a policy limits settlement, and then you get 30 to 40% of that. That is the problem. So I do appreciate the opportunity. I do have a lot more to say, and I'll try to couch my opinions, but leaving it to facts, because I think there is a factual basis that I believe how we got into this position, which I know, Hunter, you might be asking later. So thank you.
Thanks, Matt.
If I can just add one small, and the speaker will probably kick me in the shin if I shut up. But the one thing that I want this group to consider is there's a whole industry behind this, an investment industry that's pumping millions and millions of dollars into litigation financing, shopping for cases to make their mark. And a lot of this is foreign money from China. Folks that don't have an interest in us having a viable legal system. And we ought to be very cautious about this underpinning system that we have that encourages the amount of massive money. And unfortunately, the plaintiff is the last person that gets paid. And so if we're really looking after the person that's been harmed, they're the last ones that get paid. And so that adds to the injury, to the sense of injustice. And so while we're looking at options, we ought to look at this component, because I think this fuels a great deal of the frivolous. And to answer Will's, the reason companies are not leaving the state, they're just not selling policies, because they know I'm going to punish them. If you leave the state, you're not coming back when the sun is, when we fix this. There is repercussions that if you leave us hanging dry, you're going to be waiting in a timeout chair for a while.
Yeah, thanks.
Hunter, can I respond? Commissioner King is absolutely correct. And I have been, since I was in practice about 8 to 10 years ago, I was noticing the same thing with these litigation finance companies. And the defense bar rightly recognized by statute in Georgia, you cannot bet on litigation. That's a true statement. That is no different. They are basically taking these forms and saying, okay, how good of a case do you have? I will essentially bet that you will win, and I'll get a first right recovery to it. And it is a pervasive network of how these cases are getting financed and funded, and I don't think it's really been exposed. So I appreciate you mentioning that.
Go ahead, Peter.
Just for 2 seconds, following up on both of those comments. Four of the most prolific plaintiffs' attorneys in the state of Georgia are openly advertising for shooting victim lawsuits. And that is a new thing. That is a relatively new, quote unquote, niche industry where, a lot of the lawsuits that have come down the pike that serve as the sort of the motivation for today's discussion have been shooting death cases, shooting cases. These are now being advertised as a niche industry, which leads to tons of phone calls and tons of lawsuits that never would have been filed had it not been so easy to file them here in the state of Georgia and survive a motion that would dismiss the case, which I know we're going to get to. I just wanted to make that to follow up on that point.
Thanks, Peter. We're hearing it day in and day out that our small businesses, they have the case. They think they could win. However, they don't have the means to continue out litigation, discovery, continuances. The system is designed for settlement, and that's what we're looking to address here. And Will could speak to this from his standpoint, but how does the threat of a frivolous lawsuit or litigation impact how you run your business? It could be you put up new security cameras
If I can,
or dividing rails. Go ahead, John.
I'll address that, and I appreciate Commissioner King bringing the point up. The hedge funds are funding these lawsuits, and it's causing an explosion in them, and this has resulted. We serve a lot of underprivileged kids, a lot of schools here in South Atlanta. If we go away, I don't know how they would even get to school. APS doesn't have the capacity. We've had to increase our rates. I've had to stop buying new buses. If I buy used with as much cash as I can get. I have reduced my fleet size from 62 to 26. And I don't serve some areas. I don't go to Miami. I don't go to New Orleans. And I'm considering not going to D.C. because of all the fines they've placed on companies up there. And New York City is a nightmare. So the real world consequences are destruction of small business, and it impacts everybody that business serves. We serve a lot of small individuals, a lot of underprivileged kids, and these have bad homes. Some of them have really bad neighborhoods. and they need what we do. And we just want to do it, and we need to be able to profitably do it. But with these hedge funds funding these lawsuits, it won't stop until Georgia and you politicians can do this, until Georgia changes the law or writes a law that makes that an illegal activity or just stops that from being a possibility.
Well, I'm going to get to you in a second, but I want to pick on Alexis here. From the restaurant standpoint, not only have, and a lot of these other industries have to deal with codes, different, I call them alphabet organizations you have to deal with, but also with the legal climate. How do you guys go about preparing for that or adjusting or just not expanding?
Sure. My name is Alexis Kinsey, and I represent the 23,000 restaurants in Georgia for today. I'm on the board. I serve as the vice chair of the board for the Georgia Restaurant Association. And we were having a meeting last month, and this meeting came up. The excitement in the room when we said we had a voice, thank you so much for inviting us here. Everybody in that room raised their hand wishing they could be in this seat to state their cause and their case, because frivolous lawsuits have gotten out of control. My husband and I own and operate 17 restaurants in Georgia. We started about 13 years ago. I'll just tell you a quick little story of my first interaction with papers from an attorney. I had somebody who claimed they hit their head on a wall, and I had video footage, all the evidence against it. And I was talking to the person representing us on the insurance side, and I said, I want to fight this. You know, this is silly. There's no reason they should get paid out $60,000. You know, we're a small business. And he said, listen, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I can tell you that we always settle. And I think right there is half the issue, is that it's so expensive to go to trial and to really show the evidence on your side. During that meeting, I also asked all the other restaurateurs in the room to send me examples of situations that they had, you know, that were just ridiculous or potentially frivolous. The amount of issues that came in and the amount of money that people were asking, you're talking $2 million, $900,000. I sell tacos for $5 a piece. Right? That's a lot of tacos that I have to sell in order to accomplish this. And that's not even talking about the deductible that we pay, the attorney's fees. It's not like you're just not out of pocket. So I think the perception of the community and regular citizens who don't own businesses is that I'm not suing an individual, I'm suing a company. But the company is me. The company are the 23,000 other restaurants here that work 7 days a week, employ thousands, 500,000 employees in Georgia. So I think there's a lot of issues with the legalities behind it, and I really appreciate y'all being here.
So the question was, you know, what is the threat of litigation? How does it impact how you run your business? So with the insurance companies having this experience of the frivolous lawsuits, when they're underwriting an account, they're trying to figure out what controls and mechanisms do they have in place to maybe prevent or give them at least some sort of a chance to fight it. So there's a lot of indirect cost in addition to, oh, by the way, we're going to increase your premium by 10, 15, 20%, whatever that number may be. But now we need you to put telematics and dash cams in all your vehicles if you want to be eligible. We need you to, you know, hire a security guard or hire, you know, make additional hires and all these other different indirect costs that are not even associated with the insurance just to be eligible to secure insurance coverage. That, I know, by the way, now we have a assault and battery exclusion baked in there too. So it's just kind of 1, 2, 3, 4 punch all at the same time. And so trying to make it to where we can actually have a chance to fight when there's valid information that we've got a frivolous lawsuit. We've got to be able to fight. Insurance companies, I think, would fight. They're not going to take advantage of people whenever they've got a wrongdoer. But now they simply can't. And it's easier to get rid of it for 30 grand, 40 grand, 50 grand than go spend 100 grand in court. Then who knows if you get a bad jury and then end up losing that, and it goes out of control.
In your opinion, as independent insurance agent, how significant is the legal climate in the raising of prices? We've got other things going on, inflation, whatever, but
Yeah, so I mean, I've got probably 30 or 40 different documents in here in my folder with me right now that are email flyers from insurance companies on, hey, we're pulling out of this class, we're pulling out of that class, we're excluding this, we're getting out of it. I mean, and specifically referencing Georgia's legal climate. I mean, that is in the body of the email that we are not doing this because of the legal climate in Georgia. As of this morning, we got an email over from an excess and surplus lines insurance company, which is generally kind of your last place of last resort. They ended up accidentally quoting a restaurant that was located in Georgia. They put the wrong state in there and said, oh, we made a mistake. And so the $30,000 quote they rescinded, they ended up sending back. Now that it's in Georgia, it was $130 grand.
If you don't, what was the other state, if you don't mind me asking?
Beg your pardon?
What was the other state?
I think it was Tennessee.
Okay.
So, but those are kind of some examples of what's going on. One thing about the third-party litigation financing that I've thought made a lot of sense to me was the fact that our civil tort system has become an attractive investment vehicle. Doesn't that not underscore the problem in and of itself? And so, anyways.
Charles. So I'd like to add just a little perspective about plaintiffs. I have been a plaintiff on multiple occasions. And as a plaintiff in those cases, I certainly wanted a balanced judicial system. And only one of those cases involved the potential for actual monetary damages, generally to make people do what they said they would do. Right? So I understand the need for a balanced judicial system as a plaintiff and hope it will continue to be there if in fact I am one again. Having said that, a couple of questions. You had a question about what additional cost impacts that industries have in addition to just insurance premiums. I'll give you, for instance, from my company, we have 100% of our fleet is equipped with cameras. 100% of our fleet is equipped with telematics. All of our fleet is equipped with collision avoidance systems. Basically all the technology that is reasonably available when those trucks are manufactured. We've invested millions in accident avoidance. We're a safer company as a result of it. There's a societal benefit from that. I am doing it because we do this because we want to be safe. We owe that to our employees. We owe that to the motoring public. My customers largely are small businesses. We've got about 60 regular customers. The vast majority are small businesses. They get price increases from me because I have to pass on price increases in insurance and tires, in tractors and trailers. Inflation in the trucking business runs about twice, 2x of what CPI is, okay? This business is always a single-digit margin business. Right now, I have 8 open claims. Of those open claims, 4 are completely frivolous. 3 more are suspect, and 1 of which I think is staged. The last is a case in which we were at fault and the driver of the other vehicle was demonstrably injured. He had meds of around $150,000, a demand letter for $1 million, and we will settle this case probably somewhere between $600,000 and $750,000. That is the only case with a demonstrable injury. So 4 of mine are frivolous, and they will settle within our deductible. which our insurance company is happy for that to happen.
Go ahead, Peter.
How the threat of litigation in Georgia impacts security contractors is twofold. One goes to something that Will just said, and I don't know if Commissioner King can shed any additional light on this, but my understanding, talking to my clients, is that the excess or umbrella coverage has absolutely skyrocketed, actually more than the primary coverage, such that if you're getting a minimum amount of coverage, you're going up. If you want to do what's right for yourself, for your family, for your business, for Georgia, and get extra insurance, excess or umbrella liability insurance, my understanding is those rates have gone up 150, 200, more than that because of this threat of nuclear verdicts in the state. Such that, you know, in essence, my clients are foregoing that coverage and leaving themselves wide open for just another train wreck to come down the pike. The second is with regard to a more practical aspect that Alexis was talking about, which is, you know, there's always been the calculus as to whether it makes more sense to settle a case or try a case. That's been in existence forever, regardless of whose state you're in and what type of law you're talking about. But in this state, doing premises liability law, being a security contractor, it seems as though it is open season. It seems as though there is a predisposition toward finding liability in premises cases involving third-party criminal actors. It seems as though even if you spend all the money to try to get to a point of, say, a motion for summary judgment to take a case out of the jury's hands, you're not going to win that motion. And if you get to trial, a jury is likely to pay an ungodly amount in damages to someone who, you know, may not have that type of damages claim. So there's an extra layer here in addition to just that normal calculus that you take. And how it impacts our business is we settle a lot of cases that would never have seen the light of day, shouldn't have even been filed, but for the state of the law currently in the state.
I will say, from a small business standpoint, you don't see in the news big nuclear verdicts from them. You see them from the CVSs of the world, the CSXs of the world, whatever, big business. But our small businesses, they're closing their doors. They can't fight it. They say, I'm done. I don't want to fight it anymore. John, go ahead.
You can tell from the tone. The truth is, we don't run our businesses anymore. We just try to keep them from getting taken. So we don't go in and operate a grocery store. You're not running a restaurant. You're trying to prevent from losing it.
Keep your head above water.
You know, that's a bad way to be. It reminds me of a friend of ours in the grocery industry, Cross, all his volunteers in his, he paid $100 million or whatever in small businesses. It just feels like you can't do the right thing anymore, Hunter.
Yeah. And sorry, I don't have a jar. I'm not an attorney. But we do have some in the room, and this might be rhetorical, but do you think the civil liability climate in Georgia is at a crisis point? I mean,
Yes.
Yeah.
And how did we get here, do you think?
So, you know, I feel like this environment is like a metaphor for small business. You know, we're in a garage grinding it out, sweating bullets. You know, so I think it's great. But that's why we do it. I mean, it's more rewarding putting in a hard fight and getting a good result. I do give a shout out to Chairman Walker for wearing a tie. I know that's getting increasingly hot. So yeah, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but I will say you will hear comments from the GTLA, for example, and the past president event, actually, of the association I went to law school with. Very good trial lawyer, and they have an interest to represent, and I get that. But to say things like this is about civil justice is a farce. This whole, it is a business and it is an industry, and it is very calculated and it is very psychological. So without going down a rabbit hole, there are some things tactics that plaintiffs' lawyers are using, like Peter, I'm sure, knows, but there's one in particular called the reptile theory. And I don't know if we're familiar with that, but there is an Atlanta lawyer that coins that term. He can evident the reptile theory. And what it does is it appeals to the reptilian portion of a juror. So in other words, you have this like compulsion as a juror to protect yourself in the community. So when they present a case to a jury, it's not about that particular case. It's about every case in Georgia. And you as a juror need to send a message to make sure this doesn't happen. That's how you get these nuclear verdicts. It's just it's a trial tactic. In addition to that, you have tactics like anchoring, where you set a arbitrary, massive number for pain and suffering. It creates an anchor point in their mind from which they add additional items of damages. I see Commissioner King nodding his head. We all know these sorts of things. But to say that it's about civil justice is not accurate. And I'll tell you why. Of all the premises liability cases I have defended, of all the ones that I have evaluated from the judiciary standpoint, and all the ones I've unfortunately been the recipient of as a small business, you want to know how many times a third-party criminal who committed the act on a premises was named in a lawsuit? 0. In Georgia, you have to file a special motion just to get the right to ask a jury to apportion fault to the third party who actually hurts the plaintiff. See, they've created this narrative that, hey, it's not that person's fault, it's the business's fault. And we all know why. Because everyone knows the guy who actually hurts the person doesn't have any money. The business does. So they've created this very effectively, and then they create this message. And then you go up and down 75, and what do you see? Every single billboard is money falling from heaven, and $1 million, $2 million, $3 million, $10 million. And yes, that creates this sue for settlement mentality, but what it really does is you're influencing your jury pool. See, most Georgians driving up and down seeing these billboards, they're not familiar with civil litigation unless they've been sued or have sued. So it normalizes in their mind all these verdicts. So when they get called for jury duty, they're sitting there saying, well, shoot, I saw this billboard for $10 million. That seems reasonable. And then you get results like you see in this Carmichael case with CVS, where a jury has the ability to apportion fault to the guy who actually murdered the plaintiff, and they give 0 fault. That's not civil justice.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's kind of, I think, from a more of a psychological piece of how we really, it is an industry, and it is highly calculated and motivated because it's big money. So I think we just need to be honest about the debate, and it boils down to, it's a question of, this is a business. It's not about civil justice. And we've made it far too easy for the plaintiff's industry to be profitable in it.
Hunter, I just wanted to ask one thing, really focusing on the frivolous side, Charles, to your point, and if any of our other fine legislative attorneys that are here today may be able to, I get the whole, trial bar and protecting their clients and the plaintiffs like you talked about. I'm more thinking about these truly frivolous lawsuits. Like, who are the attorneys that are bringing this? Are these, fly-by-night firms? They backed by private equity? They out of state? Who is it? I guess my question is can you differentiate these individuals with, more reputable law firms that have been, in the state, in our communities for a long time?
Well, certainly in the plaintiff's bar that we run across in the trucking industry, there are a dozen or so plaintiff's lawyers that do trucking accident representation who are really professionals. And if they have your case, it's because you have significant liability. I know attorneys like that in the med mal world, and across all niches in the legal system, and they are competent, professional, good lawyers who, if you were injured, you would want them representing your interests. But the billboard lawyers, I've had multiple cases with Morgan & Morgan. I've had multiple cases with Mike Costello. I've had multiple cases with advertising, the billboard lawyers that you see. And in those cases, always, they take it very quickly to a demand letter, and their MO is to settle somewhere between 2.5 and 4 times meds. And so the calculation is to inflate the meds all they can to settle at a higher number. And there are fixes for all these problems that are not, that return fairness and balance to the system, as opposed to making it pro-defendant. Just fair and balance. And transparency is the greatest of those reforms.
Governor, you actually made a good point. That's one of the easier things to address are the bad actors. I heard a story from Gwinnett County. There was a lady attending a music festival, and she slipped and fell, and there was a claim made against the county, the creator of the event, the venue, the food trucks that were associated with it, and everywhere in between. And it turns out she was doing this across the nation, and there was one company in Florida that was representing her. So there are those types of bad actors out there.
One thing I failed to mention, and I'll get off my soapbox, but one thing is I think is worth noting. Our appellate courts have systematically expanded what ordinary care means. So over time, we've gone from basically ordinary care to extraordinary care, particularly that was a case where some guys got beat up outside of Six Flags property, but they found that they were liable because it was an approach to their property. So we now have to protect not only our property, but property next to our property. And then you have the Carmichael case that we keep mentioning by the Supreme Court that gives us totality of the circumstances standard. That basically is just legalese where everything goes. Just let the jury decide. But I think it's important to recognize that there are numerous justices, and Sean LaGrue was one of them, who I know and respect, that said, we need to take this up legislatively. I mean, the judiciary recognizes not just small business, but the judiciary recognizes this needs to be addressed legislatively because the courts are just following a slow, gradual expansion from one case to the next, and it's getting wider and wider and wider.
I'm going to let Peter talk, and then I want to address some of the tenured legislatures in the room.
Just to follow up exactly what Matt said, in this Carmichael case that we've been talking about with CVS, 2 Supreme Court justices at the end of their opinion, after they upheld this $43 million verdict with 0% to the shooter, said the following: in rendering our decision, we are mindful of the economic and policy arguments advanced by the parties. Those policies were the public policy arguments we're talking about today: insurance, food deserts, the whole shooting match. But such considerations are reserved to the General Assembly. This court is bound by what the law is and not what the parties or the members of this court think it should be. Another justice said, I would urge our General Assembly to consider these issues, whether businesses in high crime areas will remain viable given the increased liability exposure guaranteed by this ruling, as they institute laws imposing premises liability on businesses in this state. They're practically begging the legislature to get involved so that they don't have to continue to render these rulings. Simply make that point. And to answer Governor Kemp's question with regard to who's filing these lawsuits, seeing every day new lawsuits filed in Georgia like I do, it's getting harder and harder to distinguish. It used to be that there was the meritorious cases that Charles is talking about were the big hitters in Georgia. Now, because of how easy it is to extract a settlement quickly, because the law is such that people are scared to death to even wade into litigation, you're seeing more and more of the big hitters take cases that they would never have filed before. That's my experience over the course of the last year and a half.
Yeah, that brings us to the next question. How did it get to this point? Are there just loopholes in the law? Are they vaguely written? That's a question I'm extremely curious on. Have they just gradually taken advantage of it, or has there been something that has been taken off the books recently?
I'm not an attorney by any means. I study marketing and I own restaurants, but I have learned a lot of legal jargon in the last 13 years. And I don't know if I don't think this has been a change, but some consistency that I've seen in some of the lawsuits that we've gotten letters for is they'll wait until the statute of limitations runs up. So they'll wait 2 years, exactly 2 years, or it will be 1 year and 364 days, and then they file the lawsuit. By that time, you've lost your camera footage. People have gone, you're trying to get employee, for a small business, we have good standards. If an accident occurs, you get witness statements, you have all this, but the independent restaurant owner doesn't know how to respond to that. The independent business owner doesn't know that you should go ahead and just in case this goes to trial, you need to interview everybody present, get all your camera footage, hold it for 2 years. So I think that's one of the commonalities that I've seen with these lawsuits that really aren't legit.
I think part of it's been as we've become accustomed to, and it's been a gradual increase in these verdicts that come down and whatnot. So it's almost a function of last year it was the $10 million claim. This year it's the $20 million claim next year. And so we just hear it and it doesn't, they just keep on trying to up the ante with it. We talked about food deserts earlier, and insurance companies utilize data, like crime data, in certain areas to determine whether or not it's a good risk or not. And so with the reasonable foreseeability and totality of circumstances that Matt was talking about, why on earth would an insurance company want to expose themselves in a area that has higher crime? Often it may be a more disadvantaged community in part of town, if you will. And so that's just going to exacerbate the issue of food deserts and having groceries and other commodities readily available to the consumers in that area.
I'm John Kennedy. I am the president pro tem of the Georgia Senate, and my daytime job is I'm a lawyer, and I represent businesses of all different sizes. And so counseling them through these issues, I see this. I also do a significant amount of defense work. So I see it from the courtroom and the litigation perspective as well. As to the issue of kind of how we got here, I really think it's a combination of, Hunter, of so many of the different things that have come out during the course of this discussion of just a little over an hour. And I think it's been very powerful for us to be able to hear this from the business perspective. I think it's a combination of some societal change, Charles, like you talked about, that is just clearly a different world than it was 30 years ago. It is partly the impact of the advertising that's going on. I think the public is desensitized to large verdicts, and that's no accident. That is absolutely a product of the targeted and strategic advertising that's going on. One of the TV lawyers, so to speak, one of his ads that he runs, the theme is a lottery type. You're at the fair and you pick the right duck or you shoot the right and you win. And that's what you need to do if you come to him. It's not, Charles, about what you talked about of fair and balanced. And so that messaging is there. What do we need to do? I think, Matt, as you said, I think it's going to require a targeted approach of the legislators in the Georgia legislature to do something about it, because there has been a shift in how our civil practice laws and our substantive laws have been dealt with at the appellate level. It's not just at the trial level, but it's also at the appellate level, and I completely agree with that. One of the things that we've seen this year that we worked on that is a bit of a success, and we're not talking about it because I think we all hope, and it's the time-limited demands. That was a huge runaway problem where there was a cottage industry, still is, but a cottage industry among the plaintiffs' bar to send tricky demand letters that are designed to trip up the insurance company that has already said, my maximum policy limits exposure here, I want to tender that to you, Mr. or Miss Plaintiff. I'm going to give you all the money that I'm contractually obligated to give. And the lawyer in the cottage industry wants to create a trickery through the demand letter. And unfortunately, that was furthered and allowed at the appellate level because of opinions that get too technical to get into here today. But you're right. That, I think, is where we need it's an example of how we can do something. And this year we passed SB 83. And I hope that it is going to, if it doesn't completely fix that issue, it's going to curtail it significantly. If I could, Hunter, just make two other comments. And Governor, thank you so much for putting this together. We need to be listening to these businesses. We need to understand the pain that they're in, and that's what this is allowing. Thank you, Lieutenant Governor Jones, John King, Commissioner, and the Speaker, all. I hope the businesses see that there's a sincere interest from state government to do something about this. But as we move forward, Governor, and thank you, you're going to have at least 2 more of these listening tours, as I understand. As we move forward, I hope that this panel and those that are interested in this will be aware to 2 false choice narratives that are already developed out there, and we're going to hear about them as this comes. And Matt, you alluded to one of them, and that is those that are going to oppose these efforts are going to say everything we're trying to do is throwing out the entire civil justice system. That's how it's going to be characterized, and I don't think we need that. You businessmen don't think we need that. Everybody agrees that folks that are injured need to be fairly compensated. We just need to rebalance the rules and make some minor changes to the civil practice rules and other things. Last thing I'll say, secondly, is the other narrative that's going to develop is because of the focus on insurance companies is they're going to say, well, if you're going to change anything, you make the insurance companies promise that premiums will go down. I don't know any business in the world that will promise you that the cost of doing business or the products they sell will go down next year when there's 100 variables that affect that. So let's not fall prey as we think about this to that argument that will be made of make them promise that. I think the hope is that if we do make some changes, we can at least see a leveling out of these increases, and then maybe there's some decreases in the future, but let's be realistic about the business impact and the forces that are on Georgia businesses and what they have to do just to be profitable and operate. Thank you.
Thank you, Hunter. Like John, I'm an attorney as well. I took my tie off, Larry. What are you trying to do with the tie over there? Thank you, first off, Governor, for doing this, Commissioner, Lieutenant Governor, and all y'all who are here. This is much better than trying to figure this out at 1 a.m. the week of Sine Die and a judiciary hearing. We were all in. I'm Brian Strickland. I'm Senator for District 17, which is more South and East Metro Atlanta. I chair the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. I thought y'all could read my name tag. But thank you for doing this. This is how it's supposed to be. Look, it'd be much easier if we just went and passed a bill and went out and ran our campaigns and said we solved a problem. That's what politicians do. John and Matt both commented on how you were happy that we're doing things this way, and thank the governor for doing things differently. And I like to think this is how we do things in Georgia, especially under Governor Kemp. We don't just do things for the next election. It's better to study this and make sure we're actually going to make a difference. There's 2 big things we don't want to do. One, we don't want to have unintended consequences. We don't want to make it where people with legitimate claims don't have access to our courts. But second, equally as bad, we don't want to just say we did something and accomplish nothing for our businesses in our state. Like John was mentioning, and so my day job, my firm is a little bit unique. We do have a plaintiff side of my firm. We don't have billboards, luckily. I don't see money flying around me in my pictures. We also have a defense side. We do insurance defense as well. And so I hear from both sides. My practice, I do civil litigation work, represent mostly businesses in business litigation, contract litigation, real estate litigation. I was with Bill Cowsard, one of our colleagues, who's also an attorney, last week in an event in Walton County, and he was in the middle of a jury trial on the defense side. And I said, you'd be proud of me. I'm going to court tomorrow, last week, to defend a business with an anti-SLAPP claim against a trial lawyer. And I haven't got a ruling back, but I'm optimistic that I actually may have accomplished getting a case dismissed without having to go settle. And that's a good example of what I saw. This is a small business owner who had an exclusion in his policy because insurance companies don't hire me normally, and I represent him on other stuff, so he hired me to represent him in this case. And I don't have a pot of money to give the trial lawyer, and so we instead are trying to get the case dismissed. But at some point, he'll have to say, I'm paying you this much. What can I pay to make them go away? And it is definitely a frivolous case, and I won't name names, but the person has a billboard out here on 75 that filed it. And so what I hope we're going to accomplish, though, is we're going to reach that balance, and I've enjoyed just listening to you all today and learning from you all today. This is a much better way to do things, and I look forward to seeing some meaningful reform next year we can all work together on. Thank you so much.
It's actually a good segue into the next question I have, and we're coming up on time, and a lot of these have already been touched on. Next question is, do you know or have you been affected by a frivolous lawsuit? We could all say yeah, but Robert, definitely. The question is, how is it ultimately resolved? But I think an easier question to ask is, did you go to trial and actually win? Did anybody here do that?
No.
Robert? No.
So, frivolous lawsuit, we try to do great customer service. We gave a parent milk, formula, ready-to-feed formula for their child before they go home on an hour-long drive home. It's the parent's bottle. The parent called back and said, oh, there's maggots in the bottle. 3 years later, they then come and hit us with a lawsuit. So it's just too easy for, if it's I get hurt or I'm not happy, I'm going to sue. And if I can get 40 grand, buy me a new car or pay a couple bills off. But it's just too easy, and there's no burden for something that is frivolous for it to actually give a valid reason for a lawsuit. If there's a valid reason, please. That's why we have insurance.
And how do you even defend against that? It is 3 years ago. There's no evidence, and I'm sure if you do have security, it was already erased, right?
No, well, the Bright from the Start has a great reputation of making sure you document what you have. For early child care, they make us document everything. Conversation and documentation are two different things. And so we have documentation on it, and it wrote down our policies and procedures. Our policies say that, parents bring their bottles in. It's not our bottle. And we have those documents to support it. But the insurance claim is saying, hey, if we had to realize we have a soft asset or a child, it's better to settle. Because no one wants to see, a child got hurt. Anyone who has children here, if your child cries, you hurt. And so why risk? So I understand where the settling comes from, but it's too easy.
That's a good point. And lastly, and we'll let you speak on this in a minute, but we're hearing all these buzzwords like frivolous lawsuits, excessive verdicts. It's not really something you could explain easily. So for my wordsmiths on the panel, how would you go about talking about the legal climate to your communities? And we call them in an elevator pitch. How do we get the messaging about this is needed?
So I was going to answer your earlier question, but Chairman Strickland is exactly right. I mean, insurance companies are experts in adjusting risk. So when they're presented with a claim, there's a risk associated with going to trial, and you can alleviate risk by settling. So it's just strictly an analysis on their part. So you can't necessarily fault them for settling cases. But to the frivolous piece of it, I'll give you an example, and this goes back to my kind of psychological comment earlier. We had a guy come in one of our convenience stores, and a customer had closed one of the cooler doors, and closing it kind of shattered, but the glass didn't break. It was kind of splintered. And a subsequent customer we saw was just standing there next to the door. And our manager came up to him and said, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm waiting for this thing to break so I can sue you." But I mean, but that's the mentality we've created. It's like it's more beneficial for him to play the lottery, to go out there to get a lawsuit, to get a good payday, and then not have an impact on the Georgia economy or the labor force. It's better for him to do something like that. So,
Peter, last thing.
To answer your question about how to explain this to the average Georgian. Under the current law in the state of Georgia, it would not be prudent for any security company to take work in certain areas of the state. If you think that having security as part of your business is a good idea, which I think everyone generally would agree, that the likelihood of security companies continuing to take work in this climate is dramatically reducing, and that has borne out over the course of the last several years. But more to a pocketbook perspective, in addition to food deserts, insurance costs that are levied against businesses work their way down to security companies, who then charge higher rates to businesses, who then charge higher rates to customers. So I was talking to Commissioner King earlier about this exact thing. It is it really is a relatively direct line into their pocketbook, given the dramatic increases in both verdict sizes and insurance costs.
I'm going to, real quick, we're running
And
out.
I'll make it quick. So Senator Kennedy stated that one thing that we're going to hear about is, well, let's get insurance premiums down. Is it going to be, it's not a rip of the Band-Aid off thing that we pass legislation and all of a sudden insurance premiums go down by 10 or 15% next year. It's going to take time to develop, and there's still a trailing statute of limitations on claims that have already been brought forward. What I think is that there's 1,098 admitted markets in the state of Georgia today. It's a competitive marketplace. If you've got insurance company A competing against insurance company B, and if they think that they can make more money by charging less money than the other guy, they're going to do it 99 times or 100 times out of 100. And that's just a simple matter of fact. We have got a competitive marketplace. We've just got to get it balanced so that everybody can compete again.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, Governor, for hosting us. Thank you, John. It's been incredible. I think God wants some change because it's not 100 degrees like it normally is during August. So, again, thank you, and I'm going to turn it over to the Governor for closing remarks.
Well, Hunter, thank you. Great job. Thanks to you and the NFIB for being a part of this. And, John, just want to thank you and the team again for having us. I want to thank the members of the media that are here. I mean, we need, as the President Pro Tem and Chairman Strickland said, we need to have just a good, honest policy debate on this issue. We need, members of both parties involved in this because this is affecting every community and every district in our state, and that's what we're planning on doing. I want to thank Lieutenant Governor Jones, Leader Gooch, Larry, rest of the legislators that are here, but just especially our business owners and those of you that are representing your industry. It's so good for us to hear directly from you of what you're dealing with every single day. I think the good thing about a lot of the people that are in elected positions here today, we're experiencing those things like Lieutenant Governor mentioned. I was part of the, Donegal decision. We had to find a new marketplace. Thankfully, we were in a business that there was a pretty good market there. But, like John, he's still wondering today whether there's going to be a market. Like to have you guys stay involved. But just because we finished today doesn't mean that your work as panelists in the industries that you're supporting are done. If there's other stories, other people that we need to hear from, we've got all of our staff in the governor's office that's working on this, the lieutenant governor's staff. I know the speaker had to leave for another event, but his staff is engaged. We need to, General King, thank you. We need to continue to hear your stories and what is happening in the real world, specific things that we need to be looking where we can, really take strategic strikes at the law to make a difference. And at the end of the day, it's about what we talked about earlier. We need affordability and access, just like on our reinsurance program we did in the healthcare marketplace. Before we did that, we had 87% of the counties that only had 2 or less health insurance marketers, carriers that would offer insurance, and now we have 10 to 11 in most markets, and we've driven down cost. And I think our goal is going to be, what strategic positions and policies can we look at that will stabilize the marketplace, that will simply do, we have a great way to measure this. We can just look at the surrounding states. That's who we're competing with in the business environment. Every day we're competing with, especially Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina, North Carolina, sometimes Florida. And we need to have the same marketplace that they have. And I don't believe we have that right now. And I think it's very hard for people to argue against parity and having a good system that is good for the businesses, it's good for the plaintiffs, and it's fair, and like was mentioned, is transparent. And that is what my goal is, and I know the other policymakers here are looking forward to working on that issue as well. So we'll look forward to continuing our work, but please continue to communicate with the office. And look, this is all about, selling our communities, but also making sure the legislators understand the position that we're in and educating them as to why we need to do this. And so thank you guys for being here today. With that, have a great rest of the afternoon.